Halo Infinite seems like it's packed with boss battles, and that's kinda cool. It's also got me a little worried. Unfortunately, one of the more unimpressive parts of Halo's campaign lineage is its boss fight encounters. In fact, many of them are so functionally unimpressive it's hard to qualify them as tried and true boss fights. But despite their lackluster appearances, they're actually some of the most memorable and experientially impactful parts of the Halo campaigns. I'm the Home Slice, Ascend
the double gulp cup for the fucking Slurpee.
Period. It's the perfect time to recount Halo's boss fight encounters, what they've done right, what they've done very wrong, and we'll explore how Halo Infinite is poised to permanently change what a boss fight looks like in Halo, for the better. Now, I realize I might have ruffled some feathers in the beginning when I said the boss fights were lackluster, so let's start this video by getting up on level ground. What exactly constitutes a good boss battle? Now, I understand this question might be trending along the line of philosophical, if not highly opinionated and subjective, but I'm going to define some terms here. I think one of the most important core elements of a boss fight is how often boss fights disable or otherwise prevent the player from defeating the boss the same way they would defeat a regular enemy. And while the scale, grandiose, and delivery of boss fights has changed over the last 3 decades, these elements have remained consistent throughout. An example as simple as Super Mario 64 shows this trait. Mario cannot simply punch, kick, or head stomp Bowser to death. To defeat him, the player must enact a mechanic where you spin him around and throw him onto a bomb. That word is important. No, not bomb, mechanic. A mechanic in my terms is an interactive function or action that directly affects the results of battle, and further, a mechanic, or at least any good one, is wholly if not highly unique to the enemy related to it. That was a long-winded way to say a classic, well-defined boss fight forces the player to learn and utilize a new gameplay rule specific to that boss. The Legend of Zelda games notoriously tie their dungeon reward items to boss fights, making it so that an item earned in a dungeon is completely integral to defeat the boss, and in some cases, the reward may even have function that is completely isolated to the boss encounter. So, the first lens we'll gloss over Halo with is the one that isolates mechanics. And for me, this is where we encounter our first major issue. Halo's boss fights have virtually no mechanics that deviate them from normal gameplay. I think the most obviously mechanic-driven boss fight in Halo is Halo 2's fight against the heretic leader, who at the start of the fight will toss out 2 hollow drones, which when not damaged perfectly resemble the heretic and can damage you all the same. Also, this is legit the first and last time this hollow drone thing appears in the entire frickin' franchise. Also, this dude flies. We don't even get to start flying in these games until like 6 years after this came out. But even this fight isn't without flaw. The major issue is that you can literally sword lunge this guy to death in 2.5 seconds if you start this fight with a sword. Kinda seems like an oversight. The bad news though is that no other Halo boss fight really has a mechanic as unique as this one. I guess you can consider punching the Prophet of Regret to death a mechanic. Kinda. Not really. The rest of the boss fights in Halo are often defined by one central trait, one that is so uninspiring and simple, I don't even want to call it a mechanic. Whatever you want to call it, it's known as being a bullet sponge. Unfortunately, many boss fights in Halo are defined by the fact that the enemy simply has a lot more health than a typical non-boss. Tartarus is a shielded bullet sponge, 343 Guilty Spark was a weak sponge, the Warden Eternal is definitely a sponge, he's like 40 sponges, and it's Halo's reliance on sponge-type bosses that has me worried, because Halo Infinite might be doing the same thing. This encounter we see here seems to indicate some form of boss encounter, but there's nothing really going on here except a whole lot of sponging from this guy. Now, there's one thing that Halo's kinda gotten right in my opinion. That's its mass scale boss fights. Ironically, we can't seem to get any good mano-a-mano fights, but Halo fans can very easily recount fights against scarabs in Halo 3, or how Halo 2 and Halo 5 used entire levels to allow players to take on the Super Scarab and the Kraken respectively. And while it may not have been the boss encounter, Halo 5's Guardian Spine encounter is one of my favorite sequences in all of Halo, based on its stellar combat scale and, in my opinion, a great score to match. But if you ask me, these level-long drawn-out encounters don't have to be centered around giant machine fights. These same concepts can be applied to standalone bosses, kind of akin to how Destiny does its strikes. Think about the Taken Witch, or Taniks. He doesn't even have a house. When I see an enemy like the Harbinger, who seems to possess space magic abilities unseen since the Didact in Halo 4, it's easy for me to imagine a level-long struggle encounter against her. But let me rewind a bit and acknowledge a different major issue Halo has faced. Halo is not really a functionally complex game. There's nothing wrong with admitting that, but even up through Halo 5, Halo isn't really the game that's about wild quirks or upgradable equipment or unlocking new player talents. Earlier I used The Legend of Zelda as an example for boss fight design, but I need to be fair and acknowledge that Halo and Zelda don't have the same base game design. So one of the things that has probably been holding Halo back from having a variety of fight mechanics is the subtle reality that at the end of the day, the only way you can play Halo is to be shooting and punching. All that being said, none of that has to be the case anymore. Because Halo Infinite's campaign is implementing upgradable and changeable equipment. This will allow the player to craft Master Chief to achieve things not possible before. It's because of this simple fact that I'm hopeful that boss fights can now be designed in ways previously unachievable. What if to see Jaga Rodamni, you need a special type of sensor upgrade? What if to fight the Harbinger, you need that stun grapple? What if to stop this brute from running you over, you need a special type of repulsor? It's questions like these that make me hopeful that Infinite, at the very least, has the potential to finally deliver us a well thought out and mechanically unique boss fight, and in a game that seems to actually be heavily oriented towards taking out new baddies. If that objective is going to succeed, we'll need boss fights to finally become interesting. So let's cap off with a question. What boss fight from Halo's past would have greatly benefited from having a unique mechanic, and what mechanic should that have been? That's going to be it for this video. Like it if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't, follow me on Twitter, and join my Discord linked below. Until next time, I'll catch y'all later.